not often there's a piece of tech that can be one of the best available tools for both a minimalist or a maximalist at the same time. Somehow, the iPad strikes a resounding balance between being elegant, thin and light, but also the ability to organize your entire life, start up a business, or even just catch up on your favorite shows after a long day. And you might be thinking, honestly, why is this guy even talking about minimalism and an iPad in the same sentence? And there's both a short and a long answer. The short answer is I love both minimalism and tech. And I imagine there's probably a handful of you out there who also like the same things as well. And a bit of a longer answer sort of just goes into the definition of minimalism. Without reading from an actual dictionary, minimalism is choosing to live with only what you need. You're focusing on what actually adds value instead of what adds clutter. And it's about reducing that clutter to simplify your life, free up time and mental energy, as well as gaining more freedom. Now, as with anything that you might buy, while this is still a material possession, the value it adds is incredibly worth the investment for some people. In my case, the base model M5 iPad Pro helps simplify my life, and it does give me a good chunk of time back on the regular. Now, it also allows me to sort of stay connected to an online world whenever I choose to use devices a little less connected with something like a minimalist or a dumb phone. Between the world moving faster year over year as well and my desire to sort of slow down, the iPad definitely sticks a balance between letting me be a wannabe minimalist while still enjoying new tech without really feeling too bad about it. Now, if there's one thing to be taken away from this video is I'm not trying to convince you to buy this iPad or any iPad, frankly, but rather just the approach in technology where, as corny as it sounds, less can actually mean more. And when it does come down to tech, at least that's where something like this iPad lands for me. And while this slab of metal and glass is definitely incredibly expensive, what I've learned recently is that while minimalism can help people practice intentionality and living a little bit more frugal, it doesn't necessarily mean not buying expensive things, but rather intentionally obtaining something that maintains a true purpose, especially if those items are actually quality goods. It could be an expensive chair, a pricey mattress, or something like this iPad, which for some people can have huge benefits and might actually be worth the investment. What this means to me, at least, is sort of letting it be an all-in-one tool without letting it be sort of a distraction magnet. What that can look like, at least, is dedicated periods of focus wherever I might go, intentional moments where I do allow myself to actually catch up on social media without the pull of doom scroll, or otherwise just finding joy in something as simple as coloring. And somehow, yes, coloring is actually a good time even in your 30s. Now, pulling this iPad into real life, I want to talk about this from a perspective of a wannabe minimalist. And I want to put an asterisk on wannabe because I personally own way too much stuff, if I'm completely honest, all of which is largely without intentionality, but that is a work in progress. Still, I think there's a lot of people out there like myself who would see a huge benefit from an iPad just based off of its sheer ability. In actual practice, my iPad ends up being a centerpiece of my daily routine, from journaling every morning, general connectedness, organizing my life between calendars and reminders, notes, and on. Going back to my decision to sort of use a dumb phone is sort of my way to try and attempt to be a little bit more present day to day, versus, where I love using a smartphone, frankly, it can be a little bit of an easy dopamine hit in my pocket at times. And frankly, not just this iPad, but any of them really end up being an incredible companion piece in my day, where I do still get that modern connection and conveniences like iMessage, group messaging, where I can sort of still check in with my friends and family a few times a day. Otherwise, having my kids FaceTime with the grandparents is something I definitely don't take for granted, alongside, of course, that whole suite of productivity items I've grown to use. I'm also huge into writing and journaling personally. Every video I create actually starts on pencil and paper, or otherwise I do find a good time throwing on some music and simply relaxing on my iPad. And while it's definitely brave to have a sponsor in a video talking about minimalism, I reached out to Paperlike first and asked them to partner on this video, mainly because I've been using their products well before even starting my YouTube channel. The reason I use Paperlike in the first place is simply due to the amount I lean on my Apple Pencil and my iPad, and I truly appreciate a more realistic paper feel. And this is coming from somebody who has an irrational value for pencil on paper. I even have this insanely expensive paper and pencil set that I love using, so that's why I like to use Paperlike specifically. And for other people like myself who really do appreciate having sort of the Apple Pencil on your iPad, I think you're gonna like Paperlike 3 as well. What makes Paperlike 3 a little bit more special, at least, is of course in the name itself. It does give you that similar friction or texture paper has without compromising the image on your screen, especially compared to some other options. And where I definitely despise the slippery feeling of the iPad screen right out of box, this does help make things feel a little bit more natural thanks to the nanodots surface technology, which does balance that paper-like feeling as well as smoothness. And as intimidating as installation can be as well, they've made it easier with their new Butterfly application system. This does come with a multi-tool as well as an on-screen guide, which does pretty much leave you with a perfect dust and bubble-free installation. I truly think you'll dig Paperlike 3, so I'll have that link down below in the video description. Thanks again to Paperlike for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Now, getting back to the iPad itself, the reason I personally find it a little bit more special is because it literally fits into pretty much every single facet of my day-to-day, all while still being its own singular, super tiny device. That morning journal I mentioned is continuous between all of my Apple devices. It becomes my agenda throughout my weeks while I still try and manage my time a little bit better. And even something as simple as a shared family grocery list still falls well into regular things I use on the daily. And of course, despite still using written word on paper every single day, the iPad doesn't fully replace those things, but it rather complements them in continuity. Still, it takes all of those things like my calendar, my reminder, my journal, even sometimes the book I'm reading. I like to read a lot on my iPad mini. So this video, I primarily talk about the M5 iPad Pro, but the iPad mini is still one of my all-time favorites. So I figured I'd mention that for anybody who wants something a little bit smaller. And honestly, just so I'm not bullshitting you either, there are going to be entire months, multiple months in one period of time where I'll still just use paper and pencil, literally because I want to. But then there are other times where I'm simply and only using an iPad. There are also the times where I allow myself a moment to decompress, not be as productive, and just lean into a movie or a show and give myself those times to sort of relax, even if it's just for a few moments. Now, where the value is in all of this, and it sort of does go back to minimalism, and it's that it takes all of these lovely, simple, and complex things and puts them all into one singular device. And depending on who you are, that's going to add a huge amount of value every single day. You'll also notice in this video, I did not touch on tech specs, benchmarks whatsoever, because that's not really what interests me specifically about tech. And if I'm completely honest, these iPads are still entirely overkill. For anybody who's thinking about video editing or gaming, these iPads are well beyond what they're capable of in terms of the actual power. So if I'm completely honest, for the majority of people, these iPads will end up being sort of a 5 or an 8-year device if you're going to hold on to them, which frankly, you probably should. I'll say as well, whether it's going to be this iPad with the M5 chip or the last one with the M4 chip, or even something like the iPad mini, these are all ridiculously, absurdly powerful, not in their actual chip performance and benchmarks if you go down the numbers, but they're powerful in the sense of what they allow us to be able to actually do with them. The same device I read on can edit full-length videos. The same iPad I study with can give me hours of gaming whenever I give myself permission to do so. Now, that's not to say a lot of other devices can't do the same things, because it can, but often a laptop, for example, will pull me to overwork, or otherwise my phone will have me in an endless loop of distraction. In that case, I often find an iPad strikes the perfect balance between the two. And while this definitely won't be the same for some people, the iPad helps remove friction, and it does sort of enhance my ability to be a little bit more creative. It could be writing down some ideas on a whim, sketching a thumbnail, otherwise simply just organizing my thoughts a little bit better, making it sort of a little bit easier to tackle the mountain of responsibility a lot of us carry throughout the day. I personally love the dopamine from taking something off of a list, or the odd time I find sort of lightning in a bottle and I can jot it down real quick. That really does help carry some momentum through the day. Sometimes, honestly, those small wins really do add up. The fact is as well, iPads are far more simplistic by design, which is why a lot of people actually use this and gravitate to iPads as their main and only device. And it may sound small, but taking those wins I mentioned in organizing your files, closing those extra tabs, deleting unnecessary applications can help sort of snowball into a healthy minimalist practice, even outside of using an iPad if that's something that you're into. At the same time, iPads are absolutely overkill. Again, they're going to be more powerful than their capacity and capability, if I'm completely honest. But because of that, they also beg you to sort of overuse them. So it is a matter of using an iPad for a specific intentional purpose without going so deep into having it sort of consume your day-to-day. Now, the fact is, I'm talking about a flippin' iPad, and I might be making this deeper than it is, and maybe I am. But again, I love tech, I love iPads, and I think for anybody who's even thinking about, minimalism and technology and stuff, I find this becomes an excellent option for anybody who's interested in either. Whether you can tie those two things together is purely going to be up to the user in this case. As somebody who's been making tech videos going on 4 years at this point, I've absolutely battled with my desire for tech and shiny new gadgets and stuff, but also attempting and failing and attempting again at practicing minimalism. And what I've realized over the past year is that creativity and minimalism and technology, they don't have to be at odds with one another. If guided by, I guess, intentionality in this case, they can more than definitely and easily coexist. That honestly sounds incredibly pretentious, I get that, but that's honestly the truth when it comes down to my perspective on iPads and minimalism, I guess. For me at least, the iPad doesn't really replace all those tools I mentioned. It's simply an extension or refinement of systems already in place, so I definitely and truly appreciate it for what it is. If minimalism is about owning less and doing more with it, then maybe this is what it looks like to some people in 2025.